They said I'd never matter because I was a girl. They gave me nothing, not even a name worth carrying. Years later, I returned, not for revenge, but to reveal the empire they never saw coming. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, thank you. I'm Evelyn. I'm 26 now, but the beginning of this story takes me back to a time when I was just a little girl trying to understand my place in a family that never really saw me. If you've ever been in a room full of people and still felt completely alone, you know exactly what my childhood felt like. In my house, there was an unspoken hierarchy, and I was somewhere near the bottom. My parents never came out and said I was less valuable because I was a girl. They didn't have to. It was in the way they moved, the words they chose, the moments they celebrated. And the moments they ignored. The day my younger brother was born, the house was filled with noise, relatives coming over with sweets, phone calls from every corner of the family tree, my father walking around with his chest puffed out like he had just been crowned king. I was 7 at the time, standing in a corner, holding my own doll, wondering why nobody had made this much noise when I was born. Growing up, I noticed patterns. My brothers got new clothes before festivals, the best fabrics, the sharpest shoes, the most stylish watches. My mother would iron their shirts the night before a family gathering, running her hands over the fabric like it was made of gold. For me, I'd get whatever was left over from my cousins, or the shirts my brothers outgrew. Even if the sleeves were too short or the hem sat awkwardly above my waist, it didn't matter. I was told, it's still good. Don't waste. When exam results came in, if my brothers scored high, my father would beam with pride, telling anyone who would listen that his sons were geniuses. If I scored just as high, or higher, it was met with a shrug. Sometimes even a comment like, well, it's good for a girl. Good for a girl. As if excellence had a different scale depending on your gender. It wasn't only the material things. It was in the way I was encouraged, or rather, the way I wasn't. My brothers were told they could do anything, be anything. Start a business. Travel the world. Build something that would last generations. I was told to learn how to cook, how to take care of a household, how to be good wife material. The words that stung the most weren't even the harsh ones. They were the ones said casually, like facts written in stone. My father once told a relative in front of me that boys carry the family name, but girls eventually belong to another family after marriage. The words were delivered without malice, without anger, just matter of fact. And somehow, that made it hurt more. The thing is, when you hear something over and over, you start to believe it. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I really was destined to be nothing more than someone's wife, a background character in my own life. But somewhere deep down, a small voice inside me resisted. It wasn't loud yet. It wasn't confident. But it whispered that maybe, just maybe, they were wrong about me. I started to pay attention to that voice. The resentment I felt slowly transformed into a quiet determination. I began to see my parents' favoritism not as proof that I wasn't enough, but as a challenge, a dare to prove them wrong. I didn't know exactly how I'd do it, but I knew one day I'd have to leave that house, not just physically, but mentally. I'd have to break free from the cage they didn't even realize they'd put me in. Because here's the thing about being underestimated. It hurts, but it also fuels you. Every time they overlooked me, every time they made me feel invisible, they were unknowingly adding another brick to the foundation of the life I was going to build. And one day, that life would be so big, so undeniable, that they'd have no choice but to see me. But back then, I was still just Evelyn, the daughter who was expected to fade quietly into someone else's life. What they didn't know was that I was already planning my own. By the time I turned 16, I had learned 2 important truths about my family. 1, I was never going to get their approval the way my brothers did. 2, waiting for it was a waste of time. That was the year I decided I wouldn't just sit and watch my life happen. I started looking for little ways to earn my own money, even though my parents thought working before marriage was unnecessary for girls. It began with tutoring. My schoolmates used to come to me for help with math, so I thought, why not charge a little for my time? It wasn't much, a few dollars here and there, but it was the first time I held money I had earned with my own mind. It felt different, powerful, like I had touched something they never wanted me to believe I could have, control. I didn't stop there. I learned basic graphic design from a free online course I found on an old computer in the school library. I would stay late after classes, teaching myself how to use design software, watching grainy tutorials on YouTube with the sound turned low, so the librarian wouldn't hear. I started making flyers for small businesses in my neighborhood, bakery menus, event invitations, shop signs. Most people didn't pay much, but every time I got even a few dollars, I tucked it away in a small box I kept hidden in the back of my wardrobe. The box became my secret. It wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof that I could create something of value, that people outside my home could see my worth even if my own family didn't. Of course, nothing stayed hidden forever. One afternoon, my mother found the box while putting away laundry. She didn't praise me. She didn't ask me about the work I'd done. She simply frowned and said, "You should save this for your wedding. It's not proper for a girl to be running around doing jobs." That was the moment I realized something important. My parents weren't just blind to my potential, they were actively trying to keep it small, It wasn't hate. It was worse. It was the belief that this was just the way things were. I decided I wouldn't argue with them. I wouldn't try to change their minds. That would be like teaching a brick wall to listen. Instead, I started moving in silence. At school, I volunteered for every project that let me learn new skills, managing events, running the student newspaper, organizing charity drives. On weekends, I'd sneak out to the public library, where I'd sit for hours reading about business, marketing, and technology. I devoured stories of women who had built their own empires. Women who had been told no 1,000 times but had turned every rejection into a stepping stone. Each story lit a fire in me. I didn't know exactly what my empire would look like yet, but I knew I was going to build one. The cracks in the cage were forming. My parents still thought they were steering my life, but they didn't realize I was already finding the keys to unlock the door. I wasn't free yet, but I was learning how to be. The first time I left home for good, it wasn't a grand, dramatic exit. There were no slammed doors, no shouting matches. Just a quiet decision in my heart that I wasn't going to live like a ghost anymore. I was 19 when I got my first real job offer. A small marketing agency in the city had seen some of my freelance design work online. They wanted someone young, creative, and willing to learn. The pay wasn't much, but to me it was freedom dressed as a paycheck. I still remember the night I told my parents. I kept my voice steady as I said I wanted to take the job and move into a shared apartment closer to the office. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. He just said, "You don't need to work. We'll find you a good husband soon." And that was it. No discussion. No consideration. The conversation was over, at least for them. But for me, it was the moment I knew I couldn't ask for permission anymore. If I kept waiting for their blessing, I'd be in my 40s, still sitting in that same house, wearing someone else's life like an ill-fitting dress. So I packed quietly. I didn't take much, just my laptop, some clothes, the little box of savings I'd hidden for years, and a notebook where I had scribbled all my business ideas. When I walked out the door that morning, my mother called after me to be home for dinner. I didn't answer. I just kept walking. The city was loud and messy and nothing like the safe, predictable world I had grown up in. My new apartment was tiny, one room with peeling paint, a mattress on the floor, and a small desk by the window. But to me it was a palace. No one here would tell me I couldn't work. No one here would measure my worth by the family name I carried. The first weeks at the marketing agency were exhausting. I was learning on the job, pulling late nights to meet deadlines, and eating instant noodles for dinner more often than I'd like to admit. But every morning when I woke up and sat down at my desk, I felt something I had never felt at home, possibility. Of course, it wasn't all easy. There were days I questioned myself. Days when clients rejected my ideas. Days when I stared at my nearly empty bank account and wondered if I'd made a huge mistake leaving home. But every time I thought about going back, I remembered the dinner table, the way my father's words made me feel small, the way my brothers were celebrated for simply existing while I had to fight for every scrap of recognition. And just like that, the fear faded, replaced by a stubborn resolve. I wasn't just trying to survive. I was building something, even if I couldn't see the whole picture yet. And somewhere in the middle of all that struggle, I realized something else. The world outside my parents' house didn't care if I was a girl. It cared if I could deliver results. And that I could do. The unknown was still scary, but it was mine now. Working at the marketing agency taught me two things very quickly. 1, I was capable of far more than I had ever been allowed to believe. 2, no matter how hard I worked, building someone else's dream would never feel as good as building my own. Every day at the office, I was designing ads, writing copy, and pitching ideas that helped our clients grow. I watched small businesses go from struggling to thriving just by using the right branding and strategy. And while I was happy for them, a small voice in my head kept saying, "If you can do this for them, you can do it for yourself." So I started small. After my day job, I would come home, make a cup of instant coffee, and spend hours working on side projects. I created social media pages where I offered affordable branding packages to small local businesses, logos, flyers, social media posts. I priced them so low at first that I barely made a profit, but I wasn't chasing money yet. I was chasing trust. The first client I landed was a woman who ran a small bakery in my neighborhood. She couldn't afford a big agency, but she wanted her cakes and pastries to stand out. I redesigned her menu, created eye-catching Instagram posts, and suggested some local influencer giveaways. Within a month, her sales doubled. That feeling, seeing someone's business transform because of something I built, was addictive. Word spread faster than I expected. Soon, I was getting calls from boutique owners, coffee shop managers, and even a small clothing brand. My evenings became busier than my days, and my laptop felt like an extension of my hands. But this was more than just a side hustle. I started treating it like a real business. I kept track of every client, every payment, every idea. I studied online courses about entrepreneurship, marketing psychology, and scaling a business. While my friends were out partying, I was building a foundation brick by brick. Still, there were challenges. I was working from my tiny apartment, sharing Wi-Fi with 2 roommates who streamed TV shows all night. I was taking calls from clients while hiding in the stairwell because the walls were too thin. There were days I worked 18 hours straight, running on caffeine and determination. But unlike every other hard thing in my life, this didn't feel like a burden. This felt like I was finally moving toward something that belonged to me. One night, after finishing a big project for a client, I sat back in my chair and realized something. I wasn't just earning money. I was building skills, connections, and confidence. And I was doing it all without anyone's permission. For the first time, I started to imagine a future where I didn't just survive. I dominated. What I didn't know then was that this little side business, run from a second-hand laptop in a cramped apartment, would be the first spark that lit a fire big enough to change my entire life. There's a moment in every dreamer's life when you're standing at a cliff's edge, staring at the gap between where you are and where you want to be. The leap looks terrifying, but staying where you are feels worse. For me, that moment came on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in the office at the marketing agency, staring at my computer screen, when an email from a potential client popped up. They had a budget bigger than anything I'd ever worked with and wanted me to design a complete brand identity, website, packaging, everything. There was just one problem. The deadline was tight, and my day job already demanded 50 hours a week from me. Taking this client would mean late nights, early mornings, and probably skipping meals for days. My boss had already warned me about outside work distracting me. I had 2 options. 1. Turn the client down and keep my safe, steady paycheck. 2. Quit my job and dive headfirst into my own business with no safety net. The safe choice would have been easy. My parents would have approved. My friends would have called me responsible. But deep down, I knew I wasn't built for safe anymore. That night, I went home, opened my laptop, and stared at my savings spreadsheet. It wasn't much. If I lived frugally, and I mean really frugally, I could survive maybe 4 months without income. 4 months to make my business profitable enough to stand on its own. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept playing 2 movies, one where I stayed in my job and let my dreams rot quietly, and one where I jumped and either flew or crashed. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office and handed in my resignation. My hands were shaking, my voice was dry, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. The first week after quitting was chaos. I worked from sunrise to well past midnight, taking every project I could. I built my own website, set up proper contracts, and invested in faster internet. My apartment looked like a warehouse, boxes of design samples, fabric swatches, photography lights borrowed from a friend. And then something amazing happened. The big client I had risked everything for? They loved my work. They didn't just pay me, they recommended me to 3 other companies. Suddenly, I wasn't chasing clients. They were chasing me. The money started to trickle in, then flow. Not enough to feel rich yet, but enough to feel secure. And with every successful project, my confidence grew. But the best part? For the first time in my life, I decided my worth. Not my parents. Not a boss. Me. It wasn't all wins, though. I had days when nothing went right, designs got rejected, clients delayed payments, and I questioned whether I'd made a mistake. But every time doubt crept in, I thought about going back to that old life. And the thought was unbearable. I had jumped. Now, I was determined to learn how to fly. Running my business alone was like juggling flaming torches, thrilling but dangerous. I could handle the work, but there were only so many hours in the day. And the more clients I took on, the more I realized I was doing everything: designing, writing, answering emails, handling invoices, even delivering products in person. It wasn't sustainable. The turning point came when I landed a contract with a mid-sized clothing brand. They wanted me to completely rebrand them: new logo, new packaging, a fresh social media presence, and a nationwide campaign. The deal was worth more than I had made in the past 6 months combined. There was just one problem. The scope was massive, and the deadline was short. If I tried to do it alone, I'd burn out halfway through. So for the first time, I decided to bring people in. I started with freelancers, a photographer, a copywriter, a junior designer. We worked out of my tiny apartment at first, huddled around my desk with coffee cups scattered everywhere. The energy was electric. Everyone was young, hungry, and determined to prove themselves. The campaign launched in record time. Sales for the clothing brand tripled in 2 months. They sent me flowers, a handwritten thank you card, and another project, bigger than the first. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just a freelancer anymore. I was a founder. With the money from the contract, I rented a small office space, just 3 rooms, but to me it felt like a skyscraper. I painted the walls white, put up vision boards, and bought second-hand desks. I officially registered my company. Seeing my name on the business license felt surreal. Within a year, my small team grew from 3 to 12 people. We were handling campaigns for tech startups, restaurants, fashion labels, and even a regional bank. I started hiring not just for skills, but for passion. I wanted people who believed in the work as much as I did. Of course, growth came with headaches. Managing people was a skill I had to learn fast. There were client disputes, creative disagreements, and moments when cash flow felt like a tightrope walk. But every challenge pushed me to level up. By the end of that year, we weren't just a small agency anymore. We were becoming a name people in the industry recognized. Our work started winning awards. Larger corporations were reaching out to us, the kind that once wouldn't have looked twice at a girl running a business from her bedroom. I would sometimes catch myself thinking back to my parents' dinner table, to that little girl who was told she'd eventually leave and belong to another family. Now I had built my own family, a team that believed in me more than my blood relatives ever did. We were just getting started. Success is addictive, but it's also a spotlight. And the brighter that light shines, the more shadows it creates. Our agency had just completed a high-profile campaign for a luxury skincare brand. It went viral, not just locally but internationally. Influencers were talking about it, magazines were featuring it, and the client's revenue shot through the roof. And with that came my first real taste of big money. The kind of payment that made me stare at my bank account in disbelief. The kind that made people who once ignored you suddenly remember your name. We moved into a bigger office, with glass walls, bright lighting, and enough space for a proper meeting room. My team doubled in size. We had a receptionist, in-house videographers, and a full creative department. I was traveling for client meetings, attending industry events, and getting invitations to speak on panels about branding. From the outside, it looked like a perfect rise. But inside, cracks were forming. One of my senior designers, someone I had trusted from the early days, had started acting different. They began missing deadlines, taking long calls in private, and avoiding direct communication with me. At first, I brushed it off as stress, but then I got a call from one of our long-term clients, saying they were leaving us for another agency. That other agency turned out to be one my designer had secretly set up, using our client list. They'd been approaching our customers behind my back, offering slightly cheaper rates. It was my first taste of betrayal in business. And it stung in a way I can't fully describe. I had given them opportunities, trusted them, even helped pay their rent once when they were struggling. And now they were taking my hard-earned relationships and using them to build their own gain. For a week, I barely slept. I kept replaying every conversation, every laugh we'd shared, wondering how long they had been planning this. But then something clicked in me, a lesson I'd carry for the rest of my career. In business, trust is earned daily, not given forever. Instead of chasing the clients who left, I poured my energy into the ones who stayed. We doubled down on service, over-delivering on every project. I hired a legal consultant to set up airtight contracts and non-compete agreements. I began networking more strategically, making sure no single employee had complete access to our entire client list. It was a painful chapter, but it forced me to level up as a leader. I stopped thinking of myself as a lucky girl who made it, and started acting like a CEO who intended to keep it. And slowly my team and I rebuilt stronger than before. We landed a tech giant as a client, a partnership that would eventually change everything. But even as the wins piled up, I was starting to learn the hard truth. Success doesn't just attract opportunities. It attracts enemies. The day the tech giant called, I almost didn't answer. It was late on a Friday evening, and I was packing up to leave the office when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in me said, pick it up. A calm, professional voice introduced themselves as a representative from one of the biggest technology companies in the world. They'd seen our viral skincare campaign, done some research on our agency, and wanted to discuss a potential partnership. My first thought was, this is a prank. But it wasn't. They wanted us to handle the branding and digital rollout for a new product line they were launching, something that would be marketed globally. The scope was enormous. The budget? Even bigger. I didn't say yes right away. Part of me was excited beyond words, but another part knew this would push us into uncharted territory. We were good, very good, but this was a different league. This wasn't just about making something beautiful. This was about delivering on a scale where a single mistake could be worth millions. After a weekend of sleepless nights, I agreed. From day one, the project consumed everything. My team worked 12-hour days, sometimes longer. We rented additional office space just to house the design and production departments. I hired specialists from different parts of the world, data analysts, UI experts, cultural consultants, to make sure our campaign resonated globally. The pressure was relentless. The client's corporate team expected weekly updates, full creative decks, market testing reports, and contingency plans for every possible hiccup. I was on video calls at 3 a.m., reviewing ad mock-ups at sunrise, and answering emails while standing in line for coffee. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, I felt alive. This was the kind of challenge I had dreamed about when I was sitting in that cramped apartment, designing flyers for bakeries. 6 months later, the campaign launched. It was everywhere, billboards in major cities, ads on streaming platforms, influencer collaborations, interactive online events. The tech giant's sales skyrocketed, and the launch was hailed as one of the most successful in their history. For us, it was a turning point. The revenue from the deal alone pushed us into a whole new financial bracket. Investors began calling. Our inbox was flooded with inquiries from corporations that had never even acknowledged us before. But the success came at a price. My health took a hit. I was running on caffeine and adrenaline, barely sleeping, skipping meals, and constantly traveling. I started missing birthdays, family events, even some of my closest friends' milestones. When the final payment from the tech giant hit our account, I sat alone in my office, staring at the numbers. We had just crossed a milestone I once thought was impossible. And yet I felt empty. Because somewhere in the race to prove myself to the world, I had stopped checking in with the girl who started all this. The number hit me like a wave. $100 million in company valuation. The official report sat on my desk, printed neatly in black and white, but it felt surreal. Somewhere in the mess of years, sleepless nights, and endless risks, I had built something that wasn't just successful, it was a giant. It should have been the happiest day of my life. And in some ways it was. My team celebrated with champagne. The industry press wrote glowing features about me, calling me a self-made visionary. Investors were practically throwing offers at us. But as the room filled with laughter and clinking glasses, I felt something I didn't expect, a strange, hollow ache. Because deep down, I realized the truth. I had built this empire not just for myself, but to prove something to the people who never believed in me. And now that I'd done it, I wasn't sure it would change a thing. The night after the celebration, I went home to my penthouse, a far cry from the tiny apartment where it all began. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the glittering city, but instead of feeling proud, I found myself staring at my phone. It had been years since I spoke to my parents. I had heard through relatives that they knew about my success. I imagined them telling neighbors, perhaps even boasting about me now, the same girl they once dismissed. Part of me wanted to hear their voices, to finally get the approval I had been chasing since I was a child. But another part of me knew that even if they praised me now, it would be for what I had built, not for who I was. And that hurt more than their silence. I thought back to the girl who had hidden her first earnings in a box in her wardrobe. The one who worked late nights on a second-hand laptop. The one who took the risk to leave home with nothing but determination. That girl didn't start this journey for validation. She started it for freedom. And freedom, I realized, wasn't about proving your worth to the people who doubted you. It was about living in a way where you didn't need their approval in the first place. So instead of calling my parents that night, I opened my notebook, the same one I'd been filling since the early days, and wrote a new question at the top of the page. Now that you have everything you thought you wanted, what do you actually want? That question, what do you actually want, sat with me for weeks. At first, I kept doing what I always did, working, closing deals, expanding the company, saying yes to opportunities that looked impressive on paper. But something in me had shifted. The old hunger, the need to prove myself, was gone. And without it, I had to face the truth. I didn't want to keep running just to keep running. One quiet Sunday morning, I went back to my childhood neighborhood for the first time in years. The streets were the same, the little corner store still smelled like fresh bread, and the old park swings still squeaked in the wind. But I was different. I stood outside my parents' house for a long moment, watching from across the street. Through the window, I could see my mother arranging fruit on the table, my father reading the newspaper, the same way he always had. They didn't see me, and for the first time, I didn't need them to. The closure I had been chasing all those years didn't come from hearing, "We're proud of you." It came from realizing I was proud of myself. I walked away without knocking. Not out of anger, but because I finally understood my life didn't have to circle back to the people who didn't believe in me. It could move forward, in the direction I chose. Over the next year, I shifted the way I ran my company. I promoted from within, gave my team profit shares, and started mentoring young women who had been told they were less than simply because of their gender. I funded scholarships for girls in small towns who dreamed of running businesses one day. Because that's the thing about building something from nothing. The real power isn't just in having it. It's in passing it on. Sometimes I still think about the girl I used to be, the one who hid her savings in a box, the one who walked out of her parents' house with nothing but a laptop and a dream. I want to tell her that the road will be hard, that there will be nights she cries herself to sleep, days she'll feel like giving up. But I also want to tell her this. One day, you'll look around and realize you have everything you once thought was impossible. And by then you'll understand that the real victory isn't the money or the recognition. It's the fact that you built a life no one could take from you. I didn't just become the girl who made $100 million. I became the woman who finally decided her worth, and never let anyone else define it again. And that, more than anything, is what freedom really looks like. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.